Welcome to Leominster Access Television and Neighborhood Snapshot. My name is Bob Sardelli. I am a member of the Leominster Historical Commission. Today we welcome Mr. Emilio Martini, also known as Marty, who will share with us, with the LATV viewing audience, some memories of growing up in the Leominster of yesteryear, particularly the Union and Crown Street neighborhood, also known as the Bowery area, a very nice section of Leominster. It always was, and it continues to be today. Welcome, Marty.
Welcome.
Marty, we'll start right at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Fitchburg, Massachusetts on May the 25th, 1920.
1920.
Yeah.
And were you in Fitchburg for a long time?
No, I only spent 10 days, and then I was taken to Leominster with my parents on Union Street.
And the Union and Crown Street.
Right.
Is it the house, you still live in the family house, the house?
Outside of 2 interruptions in my livelihood, I've lived there all the time.
All your life. And so you are a gentleman of, if you were born in 1920, you are a young 85.
Yeah, I'm a young 85.
85.
Yeah.
You're doing very, very well.
Or else into the eyes of the government, I'm a notch baby.
What does that mean? For people of your generation will understand what that means, but what does that mean for people of my generation or people younger than myself?
The notch babies are the ones that were born from 1916 to 1927 and have been deprived of compensation under Social Security to a sizable amount of money.
I've heard about that, and I know that there's a group that still working on trying to get that.
So they're trying
revised.
to settle it in this session of Congress. They're going to give us $5,000, and you have your choice of either getting it in 4 years or on a monthly basis.
I see. Well, good luck. I hope that you folks are successful in that endeavor. Marty, where were your parents born?
Both of my parents were born in Alvito, Italy.
Yeah. And they
came here in 1906.
1906.
Right.
And so again, that is so common, that story of America, the land of opportunity. We are indeed a nation of immigrants, and that is great. That's a great thing about our country. What did your parents do for a living, Marty?
Well, my mother was a housewife, and my father worked for, I think the first one was at Patton's factory on Central Street, rubbing combs or making buttons of that nature. And then he went to work for construction under my grandfather. But he passed away in early life of 1930, so his history is really limited.
You mentioned the Patton factory, Patton's comb factory, which was at the corner, near the corner of Central and Graham, that general area. That's where the Horn and Supply was, but it wasn't.
No.
Where was Patton's?
Patton's factory was. Let's see, it's the Primarini house was on the edge of where the dam was.
Okay, so it's the base of
down near where it used to be, where the automobile place is.
Okay, so it was the base of Lincoln Terrace there.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and I mentioned that, one of the reasons, that burned down, and later on we're going to talk a little bit about another significant fire in your life. There were lots of fires I'm finding in the history of Leominster.
Right.
Many, many, many. So we'll get to that in a bit. So you grew up your childhood was spent in the Crown, Union, the Bowery section of Leominster.
The edge of the Bowery. The Bowery was more toward Manchester and Coburn Street in that area. See, actually, the Bowery was a part of a section of Ross Meadow. See, and that's where the thing. In back of my house, which I live in now, We had a ball field for the Bowery boys and everything else. But we had to import different boys in order to take and have a team. There wasn't not enough boys to do it. So we had our little individual groups in that area. And I'm going to talk about the individual group of Crown and Union Street.
Crown and Union Street, okay. Marty, in growing up in your neighborhood, what did your neighborhood look like at that time? And this would have been, if you were born in 1920, so this would have been in, you know, that when you started to go outside and play and so on as a kid, maybe 1925, that era,
Yeah.
Prior to 1930.
Well, in my really childhood days, I mean, we didn't go too far, maybe across the street or something like that, or somebody else's yard. But in 26 is when I went to school, and I went to St. Leo's, which I had to walk and everything else. And I was taught how to do it. But to enjoy my childhood, the boys, we either played cards or we played with our little toys. Back and off the street of Union Street years ago, there was a pine tree available with nice white sand. And we used to make little roads for our cars and whatnot, and spent hours building things and then going home for lunch.
So you kids you were able to entertain yourselves with not a lot of
Extra toys.
A lot of extra toys, because you grew up, well, the Depression started in 1929.
Right.
So you were a kid just prior to the Depression, and then some of your youth was spent during the Depression years. So
Right.
there wasn't a lot of money around, and times were hard.
Yeah.
You said that on your way to school, you went to school where?
I went to St. Leo's down on Main Street in Leominster.
Did you ride to school? Did you get a ride to school? Took
No,
school
there was
bus
no
line?
ride. No, the only thing is I had to walk.
Had to walk.
But my parents taught me how to go to school, what side of the street I was to walk on, which ones I could cross, and things of that nature. And I had to walk around like Myman Square to Pleasant Street, down Main Street, and go into the schoolyard. And then return home the same way at lunchtime, and then go back for an afternoon session, and be on my way home again at 3:30 in the afternoon to meet my parents.
So in those days, kids went home for lunch and
Oh,
then
yeah.
back to school in the afternoon.
Right.
Okay, okay. And you shared with me an interesting anecdote in the green room, the waiting room. What about that incident? On one day, you were in the 4th grade and you had your little sister in tow.
Yeah.
And what happened? Tell us about that.
This is 1930, and my sister was down in the 2nd grade, and I've always had to take her by the hand and walk to school. She had her own versions of what to do, but I said, Ma and Pa says, this is the way we walk, and this is the side of the street. But on this particular February day, when I got to the corner of Main and West Street, there was a policeman, there was firemen, there was red trucks, there was everything all over the street. And the side of the street that I had to walk on was impassable. But they helped me across the street to the opposite side, and I got back and got to school and came back. But the novelty is that I remembered how I was taught and how to go to school in those days, what side of the street and how to behave. And we carried on from there.
And on that day, though, something special happened, something unusual.
That was the day that the Nickerson building was burning. But I didn't know nothing about it until I got down there.
Now, I am going to hold this up so that the viewing audience can see it. And you made me work for this interview, Marty, because I I was sure when we talked about this that you were referring, when you said there was a fire, I was sure it was the wood block. And because I had seen a picture of the 1919 after effects of the woodblock fire with the ice on the building and everything. And no, you said it's the Nickerson building. And you suggested that I call Paul Kennedy, who knows his fires, he knows his Leominster history. Paul, he's an expert on the No-Town area too. I gave him a phone call at the fire department, and within 2 minutes he was able to tell me, it was amazingly, he told me yes, it was the Nickerson building. He told there was more than one fire there. There were a number of fires. I couldn't find a picture. I went down to the Leominster Public Library, and for the LETV audience, it's fascinating. The librarians down there are very, very helpful, and they have the Leominster Enterprise, which is now merged with the Sentinel, so we have the Sentinel Enterprise, but they have the papers all the way back, I guess, from the 1870s on microfilm, and they will help you use that machine. And if you have you can research, it's fascinating. You can spend hours there. While I was there, this is a little out of order, but while I was there, it's a dangerous place because it's a safe place, but it's dangerous if you're interested in history, which you are, and I am also, because it's hard to get through. You get distracted because you look at the advertisements, you look at the things, the news stories, and I came across this. I was looking for fire information. Here's an ad. Buy a radio, I'm reading backwards here, buy a radio on the budget plan, and this is from, I guess, perhaps 1930, I'm not sure, from one of those papers. I looked at 1925, there was a fire in Nickerson's there then too. By the way, for the audience, the Nickerson building is the present Allen's store. But this radio ad is interesting because $5 installs a radio in your home, a year to pay the balance. And this was Rand's Super Service on 96 Main Street. Telephone number 1975. So if you're interested in history, the Leominster Library at its temporary headquarters is a fascinating place, and the people down there are very helpful. But Marty, there were many, many fires in Leominster, and on that day, you and your sister encountered that. And right. Being obedient to your parents, you wanted to make sure that
it was done correctly.
St. Leo's School, you told me in the anteroom you were the first class?
I entered the school the opening day after it was building in 1926 in the first grade. And then I went all the way through and graduated in the 8th grade in 1934.
At St. Leo's School?
St. Leo's School. And that was the first class that went through the building completely, from 1 to 8.
And we'll talk a little bit more now about your school, but while we're talking about that, the gentleman in the can pull up some other schools in Leominster, because you love history. We talked about the research and so on, and Marty, for the audience, is really an historian, and he has a tremendous postcard collection of the city of Leominster, or the town of Leominster and the city of Leominster. It's fabulous collection, and he's been kind enough to share some of those things with us, and those postcards, and we have some of the other old schools in Leominster which we'd like to take a look at for the audience. Marty, that looks like
Field Primary, which is on School Street.
And that's the old Field High School, right?
Right.
The old Field High School. Yeah. This will be recognized. That's the Carter
High School now, up on West Street.
The old Leominster High, but the Carter building, which is in disrepair, sadly. Here's another. Is that another view of it?
Yeah, the other view of it.
And these old postcards are really beautiful. They're really treasured items.
This is the Gallagher.
May Gallagher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. That one looks like it might be Priest Street.
Yep, it is Priest Street.
And many of the residents in the audience have attended these schools.
Oh, yes.
Some of which the buildings are either closed and no longer there.
Oh, it's changed. This is down on Lancaster
Yes,
Street.
beautiful Lancaster Street School, which is the National Plastics Museum.
Right.
That still is Lancaster Street School. The facade has changed somewhat, you can see, but beautiful building. That, I think, is Pierce Street. The front of it has changed.
Yep.
The front has changed. The peak is no longer there. That's a condominium now. That's in North Leominster. And this is on School Street. This is the offices, the building of the Leominster Historical Society
Right.
now.
Yeah. That must be
Is this Lincoln?
Lincoln on Priest Street.
If it's Lincoln, I used to run around the outside of that building. That's where I attended elementary school, Lincoln School. Now this is that George Street?
No, George Street didn't have the front man.
No.
Could be Lincoln School or...
I'm sure that people who went to those schools in the audience will know which ones they are.
Right.
But these examples from your extensive, marvelous postcard collection, it's really fun and enlightening to look at these scenes of Leominster, and we appreciate Marty allowing us to use that collection. Schools, you went from, and we didn't have a picture of St. Leo's School, but you graduated from St. Leo's School, and then you went to where?
To the Gallagher Junior High School for the 9th grade.
Gallagher Junior High School, and it probably was recently opened when you went there.
Yeah, it was there a good many years.
It had, and then from there you graduated. You attended Gallagher Junior High School.
Then I went up to the high school.
The high school, and you graduated in
39.
the class of 1939.
Right.
Then you went to work.
Right.
Okay, what were some of your?
Well, I went to work, and I had been a paper boy for the Daily Records while I was in high school. And that was the home edition that came out at night for all the ones that love sports and whatnot. But the highlight of selling papers on the street corner was when World War II broke out.
Okay, let me interrupt for a moment. You used to deliver papers to houses, did you?
Yes.
You had a route,
yeah.
but you had, and we don't see this today, we still have paper boys and paper girls who deliver, but you were one of those people who used to be up at the center of town,
Yeah.
where traffic, the corner of where, Marty?
Corner of Main and Monument Square, which used to be Green's drugstore.
And
Their doorway.
did you, this is an unfair question, but from the old movies I used to see, extra, read all about it type things, the newspaper hawkers, you would sell, now I don't know whether you ever uttered those words, but you used to sell the...
I used to advertise whatever the headline was or something else.
You'd yell it out.
Yell it out.
And people driving by or walking by...
would hand me the money through the window.
How much would they pay for a paper?
The record was 3 cents.
3 cents.
3 cents.
And the Enterprise in those days was, I think, two.
Right.
2 cents. How things have changed.
Right.
Everything. The prices. there was, and by the way, in my conversation, someone else, my aunt had mentioned that she remembered you uptown selling papers,
Right.
and I recently spoke to another very nice person, Roger Bigelow, who was my Babe Ruth League baseball coach, one of my coaches, and a very nice gentleman, and we were talking. And he's a retired DPW worker, Leominster firefighter. He used to be the swingman on the hook and ladder.
Right.
And he mentioned that he used to sell papers the same way up there. Tell us about your incident. There was one particular, you'll never forget this incident, when you were selling papers uptown.
Well, I was selling the records night times.
Record American.
But this particular Sunday, which I always worked also putting the papers together. See, our Sunday papers never came all put together. They were in sections, and we had to put them together. And sometime around 6 o'clock, we got a notice that we're going to have an extra edition of the Daily Record, which will be dated on Monday, that the war was declared.
World War II.
Well, so in order not to lose all our money on our newspaper, we distributed them to all the stores to sell the Sunday papers to the people that didn't know what was going on, hadn't heard it on the radio. But anyways, from 11 o'clock that morning until 9 o'clock that night, I had several different editions of the Daily Record, all pertaining to the war, and the front page was the key. The inside was the same as all of them and everything else. And it was quite an ordeal to hand out and sell those papers.
But they sold like hotcakes.
Yes, and 3 cents a copy, you know. But I had one gentleman that handed me a nickel, and I didn't hand him back his 2 cents, and he got out of his car to come back for his 2 cents. But he found out afterwards that, you know, it was ridiculous, but I accepted and gave him a 2 cents anyway. But it was interesting to handle and everything, and I did have a visitor telling me that I was violating the ordinance of making noise, so I had to stop advertising.
Because you were yelling out about war being declared, so you had to.
But I did what I was told and went on my merry way.
Interesting, interesting. That's something we don't see, at least around here, you know, the papers, people hawking the papers.
Right.
Then after, in your work experience, you worked at, as many people did, in the plastics industry for a while at Foster Grant.
Foster and Grant.
And then you, for a while, worked at Blocks Incorporated.
Right.
And then you were a milkman for a long time.
Yeah, for 8 years.
8 years, working out of what dairy?
Newton's Dairy on Manchester Street.
Okay, and then, and maybe people will recognize you from your 20 years working for the city of Leominster, the water department. You were
a meter reader.
A meter reader for the water department.
Right.
Now, Marty, I'm taking some things out of order a little bit, but you delivered milk. Tell us something, and we discussed this outside. When you were growing up, today we have supermarkets, we have grocery stores. There were grocery stores then. Right. What was your neighborhood grocery?
Well, we had Tebow's Market, which was 3 houses away from me on Union Street. And then there was down, going towards town, we had Cleary's store, which was like a variety, small. And then, not to forget anything, across the street on Union Street from the Clary's store, we had Todd's greenhouse. We don't talk too much about them, but that was one of the big things on Union Street. You could go and buy your flowers and whatnot, but that was there in those days.
And you could you buy tomato plants too to start?
I imagine he had. I don't remember whether he did or not.
Would you? In those days, families had gardens? Did your family have a garden?
Yeah, we had a garden. We had chickens and things of that nature. We had a very large group of grapevines, and things of that on the property.
What about today? We have the supermarkets, but what about people who came to different tradesmen coming to the house, like the bread man, the milkman? You were a milkman. Tell us something about that, because you ticked off a number of them to me out. You said this one came, this one came, this one.
Well, yeah. Well, see, I was taking that question as what services the family received.
Right. What services?
And we had a coal man.
Coal man.
For our furnace. And you had to have a certain amount of wood being brought in so that you could start your furnace up. And we had an ice man, which was Leominster Ice on Chestnut Street, to go into the ice box. And we had a bread man and things of all that nature with the stores. And there was a store up on Manchester Street by Bates's Market. We had Janelle's down on Central Street.
I knew Janelle's inside and out, that store.
From Crown and Union, we had a large variety of everything right in our neighborhood. We had a factory down at right near Graham Street, which was Tenney and Porter, which is now a storage area.
What did Tenney and Porter manufacture?
That I can't really remember. I mean, it was there, and I used to mark them down that it was there. So that's, what was around the neighborhood. And today I was researching because I remember a little item in my childhood that Thomas Woodworking Shop, back in my teenage days, on Saturdays used to sell ukuleles for 10 cents a piece.
The ukulele,
yeah.
You could buy a ukulele for a dime?
For a dime on Saturday.
On Saturday?
Yeah.
And they used to manufacture those in Leominster?
Right there, yeah.
What was the name of the place?
Thomas Woodworking.
And where?
On Oxford Street. The building is still there, but I don't know what the occupancy is. But I researched that this morning so that I could talk about it.
Your love of research, that stood out. Because you in the ante-room, well, Kevin's going to get, in the green room, the waiting room outside, you said that, you said something about a wedding. Someone in your family or a family had asked about a wedding and they didn't know who the people were. Tell us something about that, which illustrates just a little anecdote. You really, when you get on a topic of research, you really dig and you really...
Well, they were getting ready to take and celebrate my in-laws' 50th anniversary, and you want to know who the bridesmaid was and who was this, that, and the other. And I was getting all the no answers.
Nobody knew who these...
Nobody wanted to reveal anything and tell me who it was. So anyways, I found out that they were married by the minister in the church at the corner of Church and West Street.
Yeah, I think it's a Baptist church.
Yeah, and that the minister takes all the records with him that he has. They don't leave them at the church. So the secretary told me, he says, I don't know just where you're going to find out. So he says, well, I went to the library and I got down and asked them, and I could use the machine to read the newspapers.
Yeah.
And after a series of years turning the pages through that screen, I finally found their wedding intentions and everything else, and who that stood for them. And I notified them when they had the big celebration, and they showed up to the 50th anniversary of my in-laws.
I'll bet they were very appreciative of all your research,
well,
too.
They were appreciative after they found out how I went about it.
Yeah.
But they thought it was a complete secret.
Ah.
Nobody was going to ever find out.
Yeah.
I did, anyway.
Yeah. Marty, what was downtown Leominster like? Just a little bit of that in your recollection in those days.
Well, the years that I took at the beginning of my school year, I didn't pay too much attention to what was downtown because I had to go from home to school, back home. But in later years, I started to watch different stores open and close, different places that burned, and for a little story that was never printed or was ever found out, I can reveal today that when Castle Novelty burned, I was in Montagna's barber shop getting a haircut at that noontime. And we went out the back door, and they just looked with amazement. And he says, "Get back in there, you still get your apron on." Says, "I got to finish your haircut."
So, and that was David Letter's Mount Pleasant Avenue.
Yeah, right.
We did an interview with the huge fire at Castle Novelty.
Oh, yeah.
And so you finished your haircut.
I got my haircut, and then I went back to work after that.
You went back to work. That was a conflagration, it really was. Again, we're getting back to fire. Thank God for the fire department in town, all the departments. But there have been many, many fires in the history of Leominster and other towns too. But as time goes by, the technology and the ways to fight and fire prevention and so on, it improves all the time. But and this is one on this topic. It triggers something else in my mind. All this fabulous historical information that's available, like on the microfilm and newspapers. This is one of the things that we're hoping with the very wonderful organization, the Leominster Historical Society. The library is a treasure trove of information, the Historical Commission. It's good not to put all your eggs in one basket. It's good to have the information, and the LATV is being very, very helpful in this. They're restoring information and they're archiving things, because you can't put all your this invaluable information, this precious information in one place, because places do burn down.
Yeah, and they're not big enough to store it.
They're not big enough.
Yeah.
Even though now today, little anecdote, years ago, I was interested in doing some, I was a young fellow then, and I was interested in doing some information, finding some information on Leominster Lake, way back. And I went to the old Leominster Enterprise building, and I got permission, and they let me into the building, and there were all of the newspapers from way back, the actual newspapers on shelves. And I looked up my information. Well, today, connection to what we said about the library before, it's all on microfilm now. And those papers are now on microfilm. But hopefully, those will be duplicated somewhere too, so that if anything happens, that information is available. But again, the LATV studios, the professionals here are doing marvelous work preserving all this information, because it really is a treasure for history. Marty, what else about downtown? Any particular things you remember about the entertainment, the movies, the movie theaters, things of that sort?
Well, I knew how many movie theaters were in the town of Leominster and everything, but I wasn't a movie goer.
You weren't a movie goer?
No, I was not a movie goer. In my experience of selling the newspapers, I was allowed to go up into the projection room of the Plymouth Theater, because a fellow wanted a newspaper and he was running his cameras, and I'd have to walk all the way up to the theater to deliver his papers to him. And that was the closest I came to seeing the inside of a projection room. There were 5 theaters. I didn't,
Do you
remember them?
Yes.
Well, we had the Plymouth Theater on
I remember that.
on Mechanic Street, the Metropolitan on Central Street.
Yeah, I remember that.
The Capitol on Pleasant Street.
I don't remember that either.
The Rialto on the corner of Merriam Avenue.
I know of that,
Then there was the Gem.
Where was that?
That one is the one that confuses me, because sometimes I find out that it's on Pleasant Street, and then other times it's not. So I really, I know it was in the city or the town, but where, I'm not certain. But
I'll bet there are some members of the LATV audience that will maybe remember that.
Could. I mean, they were interested. Talking about theaters, well, let's see, this would be Well, anyways, we went to the Saturday night show, and they used to have a country store night, you know, and they'd have prizes and everything else. And this is when I had a stepfather, and we went Saturday night. And I got the prize of a $5 bill.
That was a big prize then.
Oh, yes, and how it was and everything else. So when we got home and I showed the $5 bill, we said, well, we'll go to Revere Beach for the day on Sunday. So we packed up and left and went to Revere Beach and everything else. Well, to my good fortune, you know, I gets out of the car and slams the door and the window breaks. So my stepfather says to me, give me your $5, that'll pay for the window. And that was the end of my good time at Revere.
Well, at least you, you paid for the window.
Yeah, I paid for the window.
Marty, now the downtown area in Leominster, a wonderful town, but it has changed through the years. What are some of the other major changes that, just offhand, you can think of that you might want to share with us?
Well, let's see. Well, we had the flood of 36.
Now, that has come up. Tell us about the flood of 1936. We're not talking about the hurricane. We're talking about the flood.
This is the flood.
There was a New England flood, right?
Right.
It was throughout New England.
Well, Wass Meadow was flooded over completely. And it was right up to the edge of Union Street, and it was going to go over. And there was a brook right there. But the force of the water going through the tunnel of the street took and uprooted the foundation of Mr. Gurry's house across the street, which for years was never replaced or repaired, because it said it was an act of God and this, that, and the other thing, and they lived by it. But that was the big damage that I witnessed there. And then
there were some other. There was
well,
other
yeah,
damage.
but in our neighborhood it was
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Because even my next door neighbor was worrying about the water and everything else, which that was the Whitney property. And with me, you know, I kept watching it, and I knew it was never going to get anywhere, because their kitchen was higher than the bridge that went over Union Street. So, and I didn't have no water in my cellar. But the hurricane, well, that's
2 years later, 38.
Yeah, that was another thing. I was downtown waiting to go and deliver papers, and finally they says, go home, we're in trouble. And so I went home, but I had to take and went up on the main street. I had to cross over on the opposite side because the Methodist church steeple was waving back and forth. You know, so they kept us away from that and go around the other way in order to get home, and it took me a little longer, but I made it.
Did the steeple, that steeple topple then?
I don't remember if it did, but the building was removed.
Eventually.
Yeah.
I think because the Methodist church, I remember the church, and I remember it downtown, and now it's up on
Hall and Merritt
yes.
Avenue. Yeah.
They relocated there, but their steeple was damaged during a later hurricane, and I think that's what led them to move
Yeah.
up the church up to that neighborhood. Yes, those, and many of the neighborhood interviews I've done, neighborhood snapshots, so we talk about the 38 hurricane is etched in the minds of people who grew up in that area, because it was something you'll never forget, I'm sure. Marty, any other major manufacturing concerns that you can think of, or anything you can think of that that you remember that you'd like to share with our audience? Changes, anything of that sort? Well, I know there was a lot of manufacturing in Leominster when you were growing up, and it's not, there is some now, and the type of manufacturing has changed, although we still have the plastics industry, but that's moved elsewhere too. But
no, I only worked in 4 different jobs, and I mean, something unusual that you could put together for me would be my years of working in the water department.
Tell us something about that.
We're going house to house, reading the water meters and everything else, and having dog problems and different other things. But one year, I was walking the streets over in the Whalum district, off Valley View Road, and I went into this house, you know, and waterman, okay, go ahead. And the little boy says to me, I want to go down and see how you fix the water. And I says, well, I says, you can't go down cellar unless you got your shoes on. And so she was going to have his mother put the shoes on. And I says, aren't you old enough to put your own shoes on? Well, can you wait for me? Yeah, I'll wait for you. So he put on his shoes, and he came downstairs with me, and we read the water meter, and I showed him the numbers and everything else. And being a little tot, you know, I kind of hovered over him. It was the closet where the water meter was all Christmas presents in there, all wrapped up. And he never seen them. And he came back up. And he says, how did you ever get by them? I stood in his way, but I let him read the numbers. And he had the numbers on a piece of paper and come up. But that's highlights of work.
That's where the presents were, his presents were, all the presents were hidden.
Yeah. That's highlights of work, and you know, and I've enjoyed my work. And in those days, I had a theory, because we read the meters every 3 months and all that. And activities in the different neighborhoods, I used to say I could write a book when I retire. Well, I've been retired a good many years, and I haven't written a book yet.
You haven't written it yet.
Right. But I mean, those are the different things that you do in lifetime.
Marty, nearing the end of the interview, what is your fondest memory, and I know you have many, but what is your fondest memory of growing up in Leominster? Or one of them? Doesn't that, you know, that's a hard question.
Yeah, it is certainly a hard question, because there's so many of them. And well, I mean, actually, to put the key to on the end of everything going on, and just things of this nature, my fondest memory of everything is the grandchildren that I have. The youngest ones now, and the oldest ones in my first marriage and everything, that kind of keep me going, keep me interested, and they do a lot of fantastic things.
They keep you.
They all look at me as new and everything else, and things of that nature, but we seem to have a good arc, and I can tell them what to do, how to do it, and stuff like that. And I've had different oddities that the parents didn't like, but I survived them.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how mothers are. They worry about their children on stairs.
Yeah.
I don't worry about children on stairs, because as soon as they want to go on stairs, I teach them how to go on stairs. So they learned to climb very happily. But I had one granddaughter that when she came down the stairs, she came down head first, pawed all the way down through. And they were worrying. And I says, let her do it, because she'll never do it again. And she never came downstairs backwards, but she enjoyed it. She did it, and she was not frightened. But it was, you know, really something that they all listened, and I had a grand time with them all, and still are having a grand time.
And you still do.
That's about the whole thing.
And I see a connection between this and, at the end of the interview here, just as your parents instructed you on how to take your little sister and walk on this side of the street up to school, little fourth grader, little second grader in tow, bringing your sister, and that's a lesson you never forgot from your parents, and you're instructing your children and grandchildren in the same way.
Right.
Marty, thank you very much for this informative and heartwarming interview to me, and I think to the Leominster LATV audience. Thank you very much, Marty.
Right.
And as always, I want to thank the folks at LATV, Kyle Pimarini, Jack Sully, Kevin Moran, Dennis Cormier, all the folks at LATV for their expertise. And as always, you, the LATV viewing audience, for tuning into Neighborhood Snapshot. Thank you very much. Marty, again,
Yeah.
thank you.